withdrawal by the United States from the Paris climate deal would be disappointing, but the European Union stands ready to take global leadership on the issue. Now, under the pact, the United States committed to reducing its emissions by 26 to 28% from 2005 levels by 2025. A pullout also would be one more step to erase the legacy of his predecessor, Barack Obama, who helped broker the accord and praised it during a trip to Europe this month.
Strong economic case. We have strong support of our population, and we would carry on. And I think that despite of this possible rollback of the U.S. administration, that the economic factors in U.S. would prevail in the end. But Europe is ready for the leadership, and we will definitely provide it. I understand that if they decide to pull out, it would be disappointing, but I really don't think that this would change the course of mankind.
Well, let's find out more from the ground. Nathan King now joins us in Washington, D.C. Nathan, welcome to the show. Now, we certainly know that President Trump has been quite critical of the Paris Agreement in the past, even calling climate change a hoax. But the only solid information we have right now is a tweet where he basically says that he'll announce his decision in the next few days. So how can we be sure he's going to pull out of that deal? Any updates from the White House yet?
You're absolutely right. We can't be sure. And knowing Donald Trump, he could change his mind at the last minute, as he has done on several other things. But it was a key campaign pledge. And remember, his base electorally here in the United States is also from states that burn a lot of, or produce a lot of fossil fuels. We're talking about coal. We're talking about oil from Texas and fracking. It was a key campaign pledge. Now, he just came back from Europe. As you know, he had very disappointing, and I'm using Angela Merkel's words, the German Chancellor, meetings with European leaders on climate. So they're expecting a pullout. And we understand the leaks are coming from people in his administration that have already talked to him about what his plans are, including the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the agency that basically polices emissions here in the United States. So he's meeting right now with other officials today here at the White House, including Secretary Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, who is against pulling out, as is his daughter, Ivanka. But if he's going to stay true to his campaign pledges and true to what he basically made out in Europe, he probably will. Now, the big question is how they pull out and the mechanisms. They could, remember, it's a voluntary agreement. They could just stop doing what they pledged to do and they wouldn't be in any trouble. But the thing is the United States. It's the second biggest emitter in the world. It's also the biggest emitter per capita, and also gave quite ambitious targets for the first time, as you said in your lead up there. So it's the example that the US sets for the rest of the 195 nations that are in there. And remember, US-China relations really moved forward when President Xi Jinping and Barack Obama inked a deal that basically would cap Chinese emissions and see a reversal in US emissions, kind of going in tangent, which led to the Paris Agreement. What happens there? Does that agreement still stand? Probably not.
And Nathan, just a little bit more on that. We know a 4-year period, like you mentioned, is required to quit that Paris deal. How will the U.S. Pull out of the deal if we see President Trump deciding to pull out? Any ideas onto how they're going to execute that?
Look, I think really they can work out the details, but if they decide not to adhere to it, that's it. You know, it's a voluntary agreement. Remember, this is, one commentator said, this is a bit like a potluck dinner. Every country brings their own targets, their own ways of getting to reduce emissions, all for a global idea of keeping temperature gains below 2 degrees Celsius. That's sort of the benchmark between that and catastrophe. At current reckoning, we're going to be about 3.6 degrees Celsius increase. So countries really need to ramp up. If the US decides it's not going to implement what it promised in Paris, then we're in big trouble. It doesn't matter whether you pull out in 3 years, 4 years, or straight away. If you stop working towards those targets, especially for the second biggest emitter in the globe, then we're going to have some real problems. So whatever the mechanisms they decide, if they are not going to work under the spirit of the deal, that is the real problem. And remember, you can't fence off climate in the United States or China or Europe. If one big emitter decides That's not for them. The rest of the world will suffer the consequences as well. And this is the point that is made globally, in Europe, in Asia, to the new incoming Trump administration. But it looks like they are going to go their own way and at least suspend or pull out or stop applying what they said they would do.
Well, many thanks for those insights, Nathan. Of course, Nathan King joining us there in Washington, D.C.